Hello my friends, welcome back to my videos. The past few days have seen an extraordinary wave of headlines across every major news outlet, and the story at the center of it is Donald Trump's shocking Ukraine declaration. Fully, what he has said has been described as a pivot point, a disruption, a rewrite of the existing script of American foreign policy, and it is already triggering a cascade of reactions in Washington, in European capitals, and on social media. This declaration is not just a small comment buried in a speech. It is a deliberate statement designed to reset the debate about America's role in the conflict in Ukraine. In simple terms, Trump has proposed a dramatically different approach to the war and to America's commitments, and that proposal has caught both allies and critics off guard. Before we dig into its implications, it's worth taking a moment to understand the summary of what was said and why it matters so much. In essence, Trump is signaling that if he were in power, he would seek to end the war quickly, renegotiate the terms of U.S. support, and use a combination of economic leverage and direct talks with Moscow and Kiev to bring the conflict to a close. His statement was delivered in the kind of sharp, vivid language that his supporters recognize instantly. No more blank checks, no endless wars, and an insistence on putting America first in every overseas decision. This is why the declaration feels like a product launch of a new policy line rather than a traditional foreign policy address. It is built to attract attention, to be easily quotable, and to travel across platforms. From the exterior perspective, the staging, the words, the posture, it is all about projecting decisiveness and strength. Flags were carefully arranged, the backdrop was formal but plain, and the camera angles favored a commanding view. This visual exterior is important because Trump understands the power of optics. A bold exterior can make even a radical shift appear like common sense. Inside the declaration, however, the message is surprisingly short. Rather than laying out a detailed white paper on Ukraine policy, Trump offered a tight, concentrated set of lines about ending U.S. funding, pushing Europe to take more responsibility, and opening direct negotiations to stop the fighting. This interior content is small in volume but heavy in implications. It represents a break from bipartisan consensus and a return to a transactional style of diplomacy. So, the inner core of the message says that America's security commitments abroad should be reassessed, that deals can be struck with adversaries if the price is right, and that the focus should shift from indefinite support to rapid conflict resolution. By keeping the interior of the message brief, Trump ensured that it could be repeated easily on television and social platforms without dilution. In terms of performance, the declaration has already achieved one of its main objectives. It has dominated the political conversation. Within hours of the statement, cable news shows, online outlets, and international newspapers were dissecting his words, fact-checking his claims, and speculating on how allies and adversaries would respond. Supporters praise the boldness and clarity, arguing that it shows leadership and a willingness to try something new in a war that has dragged on with no end in sight. Critics warned that it signals a retreat from long-standing commitments and could embolden Russia or weaken NATO. The performance on social media was just as dramatic. Clips of the speech trended on multiple platforms, hashtags supporting and opposing the statement surged, and political commentators framed it as a test of where Republican voters stand on foreign policy. This is exactly how Trump's messages are designed to perform, not as quiet policy papers, but as high-impact, high-visibility events that shift public opinion. Another layer of performance is how this message interacts with international audiences. European officials express concern about the possibility of reduced U.S. support, while some governments quietly welcome the idea of a negotiated settlement if it could end the bloodshed. Ukrainian leaders reacted with a mix of diplomacy and alarm, emphasizing their need for continued assistance, but also acknowledging the importance of American domestic politics. Russian state media quickly seized on Trump's declaration as evidence that Western unity might be cracking. In this sense, the performance is not only domestic but global. One statement by a former president reverberating through multiple capitals, testing alliances, and altering calculations. Safety features are at the heart of the way the Declaration is being sold to the public. Trump frames his approach as a safer path for America, less money spent abroad, fewer U.S. soldiers deployed or at risk, and a greater focus on defending the homeland. He argues that endless funding of foreign wars creates hidden dangers for American families by draining resources and distracting from border security, infrastructure, and internal stability. By presenting his Ukraine policy shift as a kind of a safety feature for the nation, he is appealing to voters who are wary of new conflicts and eager for a government that prioritizes domestic needs. Critics counter that this version of safety is short-sighted because reducing support for Ukraine might encourage further aggression by Russia and ultimately create larger security threats. Nonetheless, the safety framing resonates strongly with a segment of the electorate that equates disengagement abroad with greater safety at home. A key reason the Declaration has cut through the noise is its unique selling points. It is bold, simple, and distinct from the positions of both the current administration and much of the foreign policy establishment. Where other politicians offer incremental adjustments, Trump promises immediate change. Where others speak in cautious diplomatic language, he uses punchy, easily understood phrases. This difference gives his message a competitive edge in the marketplace of ideas. Supporters see it as proof of authenticity and independence from entrenched interests. Even opponents must acknowledge that the clarity and directness make the Declaration easy to understand, debate, and share. In a political environment saturated with complexity, a clear USP can be more powerful than a detailed plan. Price is another dimension of the Declaration. Trump repeatedly emphasizes the financial burden on the United States, framing continued assistance to Ukraine as an unsustainable cost. He argues that American taxpayers are footing the bill for a war that is far from home, and that Europe should shoulder more of the load. This is the literal price he wants to cut. But there is also a metaphorical price. The potential loss of credibility, influence, and stability that could come from abruptly changing course. Diplomats warn that reducing support might signal unreliability to other allies, making future partnerships harder and potentially increasing long-term costs. In other words, while Trump is focused on the immediate dollar price, his critics highlight the strategic price of weakening alliances. This tension between short-term savings and long-term costs is at the heart of the debate. His declaration has ignited. As the dust settles, the conclusion that emerges is that this Ukraine declaration is not just a passing remark, but a signal of how Trump would approach foreign policy if returned to office. Externally, it looks bold, staged, and deliberate. Internally, it is a compact but potent message about resetting priorities. Its performance has been swift and far-reaching, drawing praise and criticism in equal measure. Its safety framing appeals to voters who want less overseas entanglement, and its unique selling point is the promise of dramatic change delivered in plain language. Yet the price, both in money and in geopolitical influence, remains contested and uncertain. Whether one agrees with it or not, the Declaration has already changed the conversation and forced policymakers, allies, and voters to confront difficult questions about America's role in the world and the costs of its commitments. In the months ahead, this statement will continue to echo through debates, campaign rallies, and diplomatic corridors, shaping the choices that lie ahead.